So as people are coming on to the session, just a quick reminder on some of the functions in Zoom. We will be using the Q&A function tonight instead of the chat, so we can follow everybody's questions along. So you can just click or tap on the Q&A button at the bottom and write a comment or a question in there. If you would like captions, you can click or tap on the show captions, which is the little CC button, and it will start live captioning of the speakers for the meeting for you this evening. So with that, Sarah, I'll invite you to kick us off.
Okay, great, thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Wilhelm, and I'm the Manager of Policy Planning here at the County of Wellington. I'm happy to welcome you to this meeting on behalf of the Planning and Development Department. And we're here to discuss Official Plan Amendment 120, or OPA 120, which introduces a revised county growth forecast to the year 2051 into the official plan for the county. This amendment is part of the county's ongoing municipal comprehensive review, and it implements part of the Phase 1 technical report completed by our project consultants, Watson and Associates. This evening, we hope that we create a space for you to learn and to openly share your ideas. So thank you for taking the time to be here with us, and I'll turn things back over to Susan Hall from Lura Consultants for intro.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Alex, if we could go to the next one, great, or the next one. Okay, wonderful. We'll just do a quick round of introductions, just so you know who's here. So from the county, Aldo, I'll just invite you to introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Aldo Salas, the Director of Planning, and welcome.
Great, and you've met Sarah, and I'll ask Jameson to introduce himself as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jameson Pickard. I'm a Senior Policy Planner here at the County of Wellington.
Great, and again, I'm Susan Hall. I'm a partner at Lura and will be one of the facilitators this evening. Alex, would you like to say hello?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexander Furneaux. I'm a project manager at Lura. I'll be assisting with the facilitation and helping run the meeting this evening.
Great, and Lovely.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lovely Jusan, and I'm here to support the meeting, and I'm a community engagement specialist at Lura.
Wonderful, thank you. So our agenda this evening, if we can go. Perfect, thank you. So we're in our welcome and agenda review and introductions right now. Sarah will lead us through a presentation on OPA 120, and then we've got time for questions and discussion and to get some feedback or responses to questions you may have. We've got till 8 o'clock, but if the questions are all answered before that, then we will adjourn once everybody's had an opportunity to have something responded to. We will adjourn at that time. We'll do a quick review of the next steps from here. We did have a question in the Q&A about whether the meeting is being recorded. Yes, it is. And will it be available to the public on the website? Yes, it will be. So that'll be on the wellington.ca website and the page for the official plan review for anybody who's interested. Okay, so with that, I will pass it to Sarah.
Great. Okay, so we're already ahead of schedule. Look at that. So before we get into the details of the official plan amendment, we'd like to just provide some context for the purpose of the meeting and why we're here this evening. So we're sharing a presentation right now so that there's a common understanding about the basis for OPA 120. And then, as Susan has said, we'll open things up for questions and comments. And I did want to mention early out in the meeting, if you share your comments with us today or submit them by January 4th, that would allow us to have them included in the meeting summary for this meeting. This open house is a statutory meeting under the Planning Act. We do have another required meeting coming up, and that's a bit different because it's hosted by our planning committee on behalf of council. And that meeting will be Thursday, January 12th at 10:30 a.m. It will be an in-person meeting held here at the Administration Center in Guelph in the council chambers. And you're welcome to attend both meetings, but the staff presentation will essentially be the same. And then, of course, all public comments will be received up until that public meeting on January 12th. So moving into the policy context, on the next slide, while this is a county amendment, it's also important to note the role of the province. The province sets the policy parameters through provincial policies and plans. And the first two, the provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, apply across Wellington. And then the third on the right, the Greenbelt plan, applies to parts of the county in portions of Puslynch and Erin. The proposed amendment on the next slide is required to distribute the provincial growth forecasts to 2051 of 160,000 people and 70,000 jobs for Wellington County, and that's under the growth plan. And the county is required to distribute this growth across the municipalities in Wellington. And it's important to note that the forecasts are now a minimum rather than the previous approach of the province where they were a maximum or a ceiling rather than a floor. And moving to the next slide, this graphic shows the hierarchy of planning policy documents. Again, the provincial policy that I just outlined, and then an official plan is the implementation tool of provincial policy. And then zoning bylaws are important implementation tools as well for provincial, county, and local policy. But official plans are the most important vehicle for implementing provincial policy. On the next slide, we have the county official plan, which applies across all of Wellington and has some, also has local policy sections for each municipality. And then Centre Wellington and Erin have opted to have their own local official plans. And the next slide, there's been a lot in the news about Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, and I thought it made sense to introduce this early into the presentation, just to touch on potential impacts of Bill 23 on OPA 120. So to start, there's a proposed new province-wide structure or framework that's being looked at that will potentially combine the provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The province is seeking input on a streamlined framework through consultation on 5 core elements. So in terms of on the next slide, two areas under those core elements may have impacts related to OPA 120. So the province is consulting on potential policy direction in forecasting to use the most current and reliable information. And second, they've signaled that a move for increased flexibility to enable more residential development in rural areas, including rural settlement areas. And on the next slide, we're still early in the process. The provincial consultation on these core elements is still open until December 30th, 2022. And I would say that there are still many unknowns, and our office will continue to monitor and report on these and other related changes as they become more clear. And then moving to additional residential units, which is top of mind and for some. We also wanted to note that the in effect changes allow for 3 residential units per lot in municipally serviced urban areas. And our county official plan policies actually support these types of units in both urban and rural areas already. And they have been accounted for in the urban land needs assessment. So now moving from the context into how OPA 120 fits within the official plan review, The next slide shows a graphic that some of you might be familiar with. So the county is in the process of completing an official plan review. The current focus of much of our work is on the municipal comprehensive review component. And this is a mandatory update under the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and that's the provincial plan for managing growth. So as shown here, there are a number of overlapping and interconnected focus areas for the review, and they are all important, but today we'll be dealing with the growth management component. So the actual technical work is set out in 3 phases: the urban structure and growth analysis as phase 1, the urban land needs assessment as phase 2, and for phase 3, settlement area boundary review. And the status of each is shown below. And then, of course, the implementation of the technical work through official plan amendments is ongoing. So this amendment today is implementing part of phase 1. So looking at the phases in more detail here, would note that under phase 1, County Council has adopted official plan amendment 119. And that aligns the official plan with the growth plan structure. And that amendment is still with the province for a decision. The other part of phase 1, including the forecasts and allocations by municipality, are part of OPA 120. So in terms of consultation, this is a pretty dense chart, but it's important to show that we've had a number of different types of consultation and audiences for the phase 1 technical work. There were a number of iterations of the draft growth allocations that were reviewed by a whole host of people. Our technical team, which is comprised of municipal CAOs, local planning consultants, county planning staff, and of course our consultant Watson and Associates. We also reported and shared information on requests through member municipal councils and committees. We circulated and received comments through Indigenous communities, agencies, and members of the public and stakeholders. So key themes and comments through the phase 1 technical consultation are listed here. And they included the importance of preserving agricultural land. And the next 2 in Center Wellington pertain to municipal servicing availability and the need to conserve heritage. And then there were a number of site-specific requests for urban center expansion and some for rural residential development as well. And then another theme was for the need for affordable housing. So in response to those consultation opportunities, all of the comments were reviewed and we reported through our planning committee, and we also shared our reporting through to member municipalities, and we also shared them online and through our email broadcast list. That being said, it's also important to note that the forecasts and allocations are a provincial-led process. We can't go lower, and we must follow provincial policies for directing growth. One example of that is the priority placed on directing growth to municipally serviced urban centers. So where appropriate, we and our consultants made adjustments to the report and allocations. But many comments were also not applicable to the growth forecasts and allocations, and those that were applicable to future phases of our work were or will be addressed at that time. So in terms of a decision on the phase 1 report, it was approved in principle in March of this year by County Council. That's on the next slide. OPA 119, again, was processed to implement the urban structure. We did have to split out the work that we're dealing with this evening, primarily because we were working with our member municipalities and addressing comments and the need for adjustments to some of the allocations to meet those specific needs. And lastly, in terms of background, it's important to talk about what we use the forecasts for, and that's on the next slide. So we use them for the to plan for land needs as part of the land needs assessment work that we've been undertaking. And then, of course, we use them to plan for the things needed to support growth, like water and wastewater, municipal financing for various community needs, public services like libraries and other services, economic development and tourism, and transportation planning. So now we'll move into the details of OPA 120. This slide sets out the areas being dealt with, and really that's an update to tables in the plan that set out how many people, homes, and jobs are expected across Wellington County over the next 30 years. And there are some text areas that need to be updated in alignment with that. So the main changes on the next slide are to extend that forecast to 2051 and include a base year of 2021. And then in accordance with the provincial growth plan, more of the population and growth will be in municipally serviced urban centers. And that's noted there. So moving into, we have some graphics to try to breathe a little bit of life into those tables. So starting with population highlights, over the next 30 years, the county will grow by almost 60,000 people. And the donut chart at right shows that distribution across municipalities. And the way that that's split up is just over a third to Center Wellington. And then when we combine Wellington North, Minto, and Mapleton, that's about a third. And Erin, it's 16%. And Guelph, Aramasa, and Puslinch combined account for 15%. Looking at housing highlights across Wellington, we're looking at an increase by almost 22,000 housing units over the next 30 years. And that represents on an annual basis about 730 units per year average. And there on the map, we have indicated the increase and the number of housing units. And you'll see there that the highest increases are in Center Wellington and due to anticipated municipal services in Erin. And moving on to employment highlights. There we see an increase of about 27,000 jobs in the county, almost half of which are allocated to Center Wellington. There's a small increase for Guelph Aramasa at 3%, and otherwise we're looking in the 8 to 12% range for the remaining municipalities in Wellington County. And wrapping up with other changes, so there are minor changes to reference that new planning horizon of 2051 and removal of an out-of-date special policy for Hillsburg and Erin, which references 2036 and 2041 population and class environmental assessments, which have been completed. Future implementation matters. So as important it is to tell you about what OPA 120 does, we also need to tell you what it doesn't do. So it doesn't include the other phases of the technical work, the phase 2 land needs assessment or the phase 3 settlement area boundary review. So changes to land use designations or policies related to those two areas of work are not meant to be covered and will be covered through our ongoing work. A quick update. The phase 3 work, we will be planning to report likely in January to Planning Committee on phase 3 and the work that we're stepping into there. We have retained consultants WSP to assist us with that work. So stay tuned for more information about that. And so consultation to date with respect to OPA 120 and the circulation. It has been circulated to the ministry for their 90-day review. And then we did our statutory circulation to agencies and then to members of the public who have been following with a comment deadline of November 18th. In terms of comments received to date, on the right side of this slide, we have responses where there were no comments or concerns from the listed Indigenous communities, conservation authorities, and Bell Canada. And then on the left side is a list of comments received. So we've heard from Puslinch Council, and as of right now, 6 members of the public and the Wellington Federation of Agriculture. And then moving to key themes from comments. Of the comments received, some dealt with specifically with the growth allocations of OPA 120 and others didn't. So starting with those that did, the themes were related to the need for more rural residential growth in Puslinch, and also in Bellwood, more flexibility around residential growth there. And there was a supportive comment around Mapleton and the forecasts for including Drayton. And so we will respond to those comments when we report in the new year. And sorry, we recently heard concerns with growth allocations to Clifford in Minto. And on the next slide are key themes from comments that are outside of the specific, technical aspects of OPA 120, but it's important to speak to those as well. So we had, again, the farmland protection theme with, there were several areas, but to highlight a request for removal of the secondary agricultural designation across the county. Request for an increase in the intensification target to 20% and an increase in the greenfield density target to 80 people and jobs per hectare. And then a request to integrate climate change and transportation planning into our process, which we will be including as part of phase 3. Those targets that are mentioned, the targets that we're dealing with now through our technical work are 15% intensification, which is a minimum. So that can be exceeded. And the 40 people and jobs per hectare is what we're working with through the recommendations of our consultant. We also had a site-specific request to redesignate lands from prime agricultural to secondary. And again, we will report on those comments as well in the new year. But I wanted to highlight that there is an agricultural mapping and policy review, which is underway, and that will look at some aspects of these comments, in particular, refinement around the prime and secondary agricultural mapping and policy development as well. So moving to next steps. Another plug for our public meeting. Those are the details. So January 12th, again, Thursday, 10:30 in the morning, council chambers here at the admin center on 74 Woolwich Street in Guelph. And next steps for the official plan amendment will be reviewing all of the comments and submissions that we've received through the circulation that we'll hear from this evening, and through further submissions up until that public meeting. And then we'll prepare a final draft official plan amendment and a recommendation report, which would then go to county, through planning committee to county council for adoption, and then submission to the province for a decision because they're the approval authority. And that ends the formal presentation, so we can now shift gears and move back into the interactive portion of the open house. Thank you.